Well, we've got a very interesting guest here, Mike Parker, who runs an online museum dedicated to professional wrestling called the Pro Wrestling Mini Museum. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing good.
So, where did the idea of a wrestling museum actually come from?
Well, I've been a fan for a long time, and I want to say around 2013, I found a place about 2 hours from me that was kind of a store and wrestling museum combined. I absolutely love the place. They closed down a few years ago. And when that happened, I picked up a few of their things and said, I kind of want to keep this going. How do I do it? And I decided to kind of do it online because the actual collection is in my home. So obviously I can't let people into my house, but
Have you ever thought about letting people into your house to come and see it in real life?
only people I know.
Do you charge people to come and see it online, or is it more of a sort of hobby thing?
Yeah, I mean, there's potential as far as things you can do, but as far as just seeing it, no, there's no charge for that.
And of course, you mentioned about the shop that you loved that closed down. How much would you say of your collection is from there originally?
Oh, only a small amount. I picked up about probably 5 or 6 pieces when they closed, and I know the gentleman who owned it, and I pick up things from him from time to time, but most of this stuff I picked up on my own.
Wow. How do you pick that stuff up? I mean, is it donations, or is it lucky chance maybe, or do you go out looking for it?
There's different ways. I mean, as far as just signed items, I just go to conventions, events, and get the stuff signed. As far as ring worn, a lot of that, because of the pandemic, this new idea came up with virtual signings where the wrestlers will go on virtually, and while they were doing that, they'd be selling ring gear and have people bid on it, and that's basically how I got most of my ring gear.
Yeah. It's quite cool to have signed stuff, isn't it? Because then you know it's even more valuable, isn't it, than just any old wrestling merchandise.
Yeah, but it's also kind of a small community where those things get sold and traded. You're really not going to have what I'll call the everyday fan having that, and that's another reason I have this set up. So if they, they're able to take a look at these things and enjoy them, not just for myself.
Yeah. So where did your interest in wrestling come from? I mean, why is it a wrestling collection? What was it about wrestling that interests you so much?
I've been a fan since 1985, which was the first WrestleMania, and that's when wrestling had its first boom. It was everywhere at that time, in mainstream media. And then as it tapered off, you've got people who were just there when it was big. And then you've got the people like me who just got hooked on it and are lifers.
Yeah. Have you ever tried wrestling yourself?
No, when I was younger and when I found out what it entailed, basically said not for me. A lot of getting dropped on your back and, basically very painful. That's what it sounded like.
Yeah. And sometimes it's easy to forget when you're watching it, isn't it? That wrestling is sort of acting, isn't it, really? It's not like most sports where you don't know what's going to happen. So what do you think the appeal is there that, most people know that, and yet it's still very much enjoyable?
Well, there's a couple of things. Even though there's the acting aspect, I like to say, it's predetermined. When people are getting thrown around, there's no way where, the common perception, I guess, by a non-fan is, they know how to fall. There's only so much you can do to avoid that impact. Yeah. So you're seeing, some pretty cool stuff. And a lot of times it takes both participants kind of cooperating. But the visual of a lot of these moves is cool. And just the other appeal is, you almost have like real life superheroes. You got these colorful characters with strong personalities. Yeah. And, it's very entertaining.
Yeah, absolutely. It seems to have such a big culture around it, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
Have you ever met any other collectors?
Oh, yeah. I've met them at shows. I meet them in Facebook groups. There are some groups that are dedicated just to the ring worn stuff. There's groups dedicated to memorabilia. And, again, at conventions, they have a big one in North Carolina every year. And I see a lot of people at that.
Yeah. And what do these people that you meet think about your collection?
Oh, they love it. I mean, anybody that I've talked to, excuse me, they love it. It's something different. And again, to see all these things and the variety of merchandise that I have for a fan, it's just, it's almost overload.
Yeah. And have you had a look at other people's collections as well?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen some pretty crazy stuff that in these groups that I certainly wouldn't be able to afford. I mean, there are things like, we'll say, a Ric Flair robe. So if there's any fans listening, they'll know what I'm talking about, who I'm talking about. If you want one of those, it's basically, do you want a Ric Flair robe or do you want a new car?
Wow, that's really valuable then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Has it been quite expensive for you to set up this collection then?
Yeah, it does cost. Again, I try to stay within a certain budget so that I don't overspend. But yeah, it can certainly get that way. But now I also find myself in the position where I don't have that much room left, so I'm not spending what I did.
Yeah. Although, good things come in small packages, they say, don't they? So there could be something really valuable that could fit in the room quite nicely.
Yeah, you never know what's going to come up.
Yeah. And do you know the overall value of your collection, or is it kind of hard to tell because maybe there's lots of stuff that it take ages to add up?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to. I've never taken a full accounting of what it's worth. I'm sure there's several $1,000s there off the top of my head.
Wow. And do you insure it, or do you not really have to sort of worry about that? I guess if you're not opening it to the public, there's not as much risk, is there?
No, and I've heard, not just with wrestling, I've heard a lot of horror stories about insuring collectibles where even though, they'll say they'll pay you and you set everything up right, when it comes time to collect that payment, they find ways out of it. So I'm just taking my chances. I mean, it's in my house, so it's pretty safe.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it? They'll find any excuse they possibly can not to pay you.
Yeah, so that's a headache I don't need.
Yeah. So what is perhaps the oldest thing you've got in the museum?
The oldest ring-worn thing would be a mask from a wrestler called the Masked Superstar. It's ring used. I know it's from the early 80s. I got it directly from him. That was actually my first ring-worn piece in the late 90s I got from him at a convention. So I know it's from the early 80s, and that's probably the oldest ring-worn piece.
Wow, that's incredible. And what's the biggest thing you've got?
Ooh, biggest thing. Oh, that would be, I recently picked this up in a trade. It's a Sensational Sherry. She was a manager for Macho Man Randy Savage. So I got a dress that was actually worn by her on a televised event called Saturday Night's Main Event in 1989.
Wow. And how do you sort of present that dress? Do you sort of hang it up?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to. I know a guy who has like all his stuff on mannequins, and that would be awesome if I had the room.
Yeah.
But generally, I hang it up and I have a picture of her wearing it next to the Macho Man. And that's what I do with most of my ring-worn stuff or event-worn. If I can find a picture, I'll display the piece hung up with a picture nearby.
Yeah, it is quite important, actually, to give that reference material, isn't it? Because a dress or any other kind of thing that somebody's worn or used doesn't really mean anything unless you have that picture to show what it was used for and who had it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's the strangest thing you've got in the museum? Is there anything that's really weird?
I don't, going back to what I said before, I don't know that I have anything weird, but I was talking about the Ric Flair robes. I do have a couple of just feathers from the robes that the owners have sold, because that's about as close as I'm going to get. So I'm sure a lot of people would be like, oh, what do you have a feather for? Oh, it's a piece of it, and, it's something.
Yeah. I suppose with a lot of this stuff, how do you know that it's genuine and somebody hasn't made a copy of the dress, for example? How do you know that's the real dress?
You have to, I would say, know who you're dealing with, because again, it's a small community. If some guy shows up out of the blue, it's like, I have this, you're going to be skeptical. But if it's a guy you know has a bunch of legitimate pieces, either because he dealt with the wrestler or he dealt with their family or a representative or someone like that, you know, you can be pretty safe. You just don't want to, you have to keep that circle small.
Yeah. So is there anything that you've thought about purchasing for your collection and maybe not gone through with it because you weren't convinced it was real?
I mean, yeah, there was some stuff on eBay from some more modern people, and the person selling them does not have the best reputation. Going back to what you said, it actually came out that he had made copies and things like that, and there wasn't really pictures of the wrestler with the item. There would be a picture of the wrestler and then the item separately, so that person I kind of avoid.
Yeah. Now, some notable wrestlers actually follow the museum on social media, don't they?
Yeah, they do. I've worked pretty hard on that.
So who are some of these wrestlers?
You've got Paige, who she was with WWE for years, and she recently just was released by them. You have Queen Zelina, who's still with the WWE now. You've got Red Velvet, who's with AEW. You've got legends like Kurt Angle and Kevin Nash. So it's a pretty long list of people that I've reached out to. You know, you don't always get, you never get anything 100%.
Yeah.
But, you know, I'm very happy with the support I've gotten.
Absolutely. It must be quite a great endorsement to have wrestlers supporting your museum.
Yeah, because I've laid out what it is. And, you know, that's one thing I wanted to do, even though it's online. A lot of people, the perception is, well, it's online, anybody can do it. So I figured, you know, get these wrestlers behind me, so when people see the wrestlers themselves are following, they know, hey, this is a legit thing.
Yeah. Have you ever been tempted to message some of these wrestlers that follow you and see if they've got something they could donate?
No, because I don't like to, you know, if someone offers me something, I'd certainly take it.
Yeah.
But there's a line you got to be careful with. You know, you don't want to, if you make a good contact, you don't want to push it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, hey, would you mind following me? Oh, and by the way, do you have any of this gear you would donate to me that people would probably pay for?
Now, of course, you mentioned earlier that you're running out of space, but do you think you might still add a few more things to the collection?
I actually already have. It's just, it kind of goes against my grain. I like to have everything on display.
Yeah.
But I have bought stuff, and it kind of goes, I'll display it to take pictures for the website and for social media. And then, unfortunately, it just goes in a box. But I guess as long as that's the one thing about the online space is unlimited, even if the physical space is not.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, where can we find the museum online, and also find your social media pages that are so popular?
You can find the museum at pwmuseum.net. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at pwmuseum, and on Twitter at pwmuseum1.
Excellent. Well, many thanks for coming on the show today. It's been very interesting to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.